So we already defined work as the product of force and displacement multiplied by the sine, the cosine of an angle. So that means work is only performed if our force is successful in moving the object. Tama? But if there is no movement of our object, if the object is not being displaced, then ibig sabihin, there is no work done on that object. Where theta is the angle between force and the displacement. So hindi siya necessary na kapag nag-apply ka ng force, automatic yan na meron ka nang na perform na work. They follow, hindi siya necessary. So depende siya if the object moved to a certain displacement. So there are different special cases when we define work. So for example, if the theta is equivalent to 90 degrees, then that will give us work of 0 joules, tama? So if force and displacement are perpendicular to each other, then work will be 0 joules. Remember pa, no? So for example, katong sa chef na carrying a tray. So since force and displacement are perpendicular to each other, then work is 0. Now, if theta is equivalent to 0 degrees in such a way that the force and the displacement are parallel to each other. Parallel sila. They are acting in the same direction. So that will give us a definition of work as force multiplied by the displacement. Tama, no? Because cosine 0 is 1. So it will be simplified as FD. Now, if our angle between force and the displacement is 180 degrees, kagaya nung sa friction. So that means they are in the opposite direction. They are anti-parallel. So that will give us a work of negative FD. Mag-negative ang ating work. Nakuha. So it depends on the angle between the force and the displacement. So how are we going to relate work and energy? Paano ba natin ma-quantify si kinetic energy? I'm sure you are very familiar with kinetic energy. I'm sure you are very familiar with potential energy. Paano ba natin nakuha ang formula na yon? Paano ba natin ma-quantify? Paano ba natin ma-define ang energy? So basically, energy is just being derived from the equation of work. Galing lang yan siya sa work na definition. Okay, so for the simplicity of our discussion, we will just consider force and displacement acting in the same direction. So ito lang i-consider natin ha. They are acting in the same direction. So that means theta between force and displacement is 0 degrees. So yan yung i-consider natin for simplicity. So that means if they're acting in the same direction, work will be equivalent to force times displacement. Tama? Because that's the definition of work. Now, we can manipulate this equation. We can derive this equation. Ano ba yung equation natin sa force? Naka-remember mo? What is the equation of force sa second law of motion? So according to Newton, force is just equal to the mass times acceleration. Tama? So that means we can just substitute this term to this equation. Kasi pareho lang naman si force at saka si mass times acceleration. So our equation will become mass times acceleration multiplied by the displacement. So yan, work is equal to MAD. MAD, man jud basta sige, problem solving. Labaw na walay internet connection. MAD yun. Okay, so we can also derive or we can also use this equation of work. Work is equal to mass times acceleration. So we can manipulate that equation. We can derive that equation further. Kasi alam natin ano yung formula ng acceleration. Tama? Na-remember pa ang kinematics? Ano ba yung equation natin for acceleration? We have acceleration is equal to final velocity minus initial velocity over time. Remember pa, no? That's the formula for acceleration. So we can just substitute acceleration dito. We also have a formula for displacement. Displacement is equal to VIT plus 1 half AT squared. Remember, no? Familiar siya. At least familiar. Bahala, wala na memorize. Okay, so we can also substitute this equation dito na equation. Pero, ang pinaka-importante, ang pinaka-significant na equation is katong na AD. Di ba naman ta equation po nga 2AD is equal to final velocity squared minus initial velocity squared. Hala, AD. So if you notice, there is AD in this equation, na AD, and there is also AD in this equation. Nakuha? So that means we can just substitute AD here into this equation para mas better, para mas maka-derive ta og better na equation. So how are we going to do that? So we can just divide both sides by 2, divide natin by 2, divide by 2, para ang maiwan na lang is AD. So AD is equal to final velocity squared minus initial velocity squared over 2. So that means AD is just this expression. Do you follow? So that means we can just substitute this equation into this equation kasi AD man yan. Pareho sila AD. So we can just manipulate the equations. Do you follow? So we will substitute that. So it will become mass multiplied by final velocity squared minus initial velocity squared over 2. We just substituted AD into this equation. Ayan. Okay? Follow pa? Okay. However, this equation is just the same as work is equal to m over 2. Ako lang i-balhin si 2 diri sa m. Pareho lang man sila. VF squared minus VI squared. Ayan. So, ito na ngayon yung equation natin. Familiar na siya nga equation. Dili pa, no? Dili pa lagi na familiar nga equation, sir. Unsa man na siya, sir? Dili siya familiar. Okay, so we will manipulate it further para mas familiar na sa inyo ang equation. Remember, if we have x over 2, that is just the same as 1 half x. Tama? If we have 5 over 2, that is just the same as 1 half times 5. Tama? So that means if we have m over 2, that is just the same as 1 half m. Do you follow? So that means this equation will become 1 half m times VF squared minus VI squared. Familiar na siya nga equation? Dili pagyapon, sir. Alien pagyapon ang equation. Alien pa siya, no? Murag wala pa mo ka-encounter, naka-encounter na ba mo ang equation? So para mas familiar sa inyo ang equation, we can distribute 1 half m dito sa VF squared and sa VI squared. Distribute natin. So ang mangyayari niyan magiging 1 half mVF squared minus 1 half mVI squared. Ayun, I think this equation is already familiar to you. Tama? So ano ang equation na yan? Itong 1 half mv squared. Ano yan? 1 half mv squared. Anong quantity yan? May naka-remember? I'm sure familiarized na sa high school. What is 1 half mv squared? So this is an equation for kinetic energy. Tama? I'm sure familiar kayo. Diha lang din nagikan ang formula sa kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is just the same as work. So galing lang yan siya sa definition ng work. Mo nang naamoy 1 half mv squared. Diha din na siya gikan. So basically, energy is just the same as work. Do you follow? So energy is just the same as work. So kapag atin yang himo na kong yellow ha, work is equal to 1 half mvf squared minus 1 half mvi squared. So that means work is just This is final, so that means final kinetic energy minus this is initial, so this is initial kinetic energy. So ibig sabihin, energy and work are basically the same. Tama? Pareho lang pala yan sila. So that is why when you try to define energy, ano ba yung definition ng energy na na-remember ninyo sa high school or sa elementary? Unsa may definition sa energy, be? Energy is the ability to do work. Tama? Na-remember pa ng definition sa energy? Because energy and work are basically the same. So energy is the ability to do work. So ang ibig sabihin nun, anong ibig sabihin ng equation na yan, sir? Paano namin yan magagamit sa real life? So that means na in order to perform work, you need to have energy. Ganun lang ang ibig sabihin nun. That is why kapag ka mag-jogging ka, for example, mag-workout ka, that means you perform work. So ibig sabihin nun, you need energy. Tama? Alangan mag-workout ka diha, wala kay pagkaon, di makuyapan ka diha. Okay? Do you get the point? So for example, kapag ka mag-mountain climbing ka padulong sa Mount Apo, that means it requires work. Tama? So that means you need to have energy to perform that work. So for example, para magsaka ka sa Mount Apo, you need 1 million joules. For example lang ha, this is just a rough estimate. Mo ni ang work nga kailangan nimo. So how much energy ang kailangan nimo para ma-perform na siya nga work? Of course, you also need 1 times 10 to the power of 6 joules of energy. Do you follow? In order to perform that work. So that is why kapag sige ka lang tulog diha, sige ra kag tulog, of course, walang work na ginagawa, dili kay kagutomon. Tama no? Talag sir kay kamukaon. Why? Because gamay lang po ng energy nga kailangan nimo. But if you are studying, for example, then that means your brain performs a lot of work. So that means you need a lot of energy. Matingala ka no, sige ra kagutomon pag sige kag study, ngano kaya na? Because your brain needs a lot of energy to perform its job, its function, its work. Okay, so kapag you need to perform 10 joules of work, you also need 10 joules of energy. That's the basic principle. Now, what if ang kailangan mo lang is 10 joules of work, pero ang gikonsumo na energy from food is 100 joules? Ano mangyayari sa excess na energy? Magiging stored energy in the form of fats, nasa glycogen sa tong liver. Tama? So, sakto-sakto lang. Now, what if 10 joules ang kailangan nimo nga energy? 10 joules. And yet, ang naalang nimo nga energy is 5 joules lang ang gikaon nimo. So, asa man kuhaon karon sa body ang shortage nga energy? Sige na ba, naka-familiar man na sa biochemistry? Kung ano mag-biochemistry? Asa man kuhaon ang shortage nga energy? Of course, pwede sa fats, pwede. Pwede po sa, ang una kay sa proteins. Sa proteins. Proteins ba? Sa kanang, una kay glycogen, kanang na-store sa tong liver, mo may una i-produce duro. Ako pa, di po ko familiar. Pareho rata. Okay? So, that's the basic principle. So, if you need to do or to perform work, then you need energy in order to perform that work. So, that is why the definition of energy is the ability to do work. So, paano natin yan nagagamit ngayon? Because physics is the study of energy, matter and energy, and its interaction. So, paano natin magagamit si energy in order to perform work? For example, thermodynamics. Paano natin magagamit ang heat in order to perform work? Ganun lang yan. Ang ibig sabihin kasi, kapag mayroon kang energy, then you can use that energy to perform work. For example, ano ba yung mga source of energy natin? Alam natin mayroong electrical energy. Tama? So that electrical energy can perform work. So, electric fan, yan, nag-perform siya og work sa motor. Unsa pa? That electrical energy na sa suga, it can perform a work sa light bulb. So, nisiga, work. That electrical energy performs a work sa refrigerator. Tama? That same electrical energy performs a work um, sa air conditioner. Air conditioning unit. Another form of energy, chemical energy, kanang sa gasoline. So that chemical energy can also perform work if it is harnessed. So mo na mudagan ang sakyanan, work. Mudagan ang motor, work. So see, so physics is the study of energy, and how are we going to utilize that energy to make the lives of human beings comfortable and convenient. Tama, no? That's the purpose of physics. So physics makes our studies difficult, but it makes our life easier and convenient. Di ba? Yes kayo. That's physics. Humble lang ang physics. Sabi ninyo, lisod-lisod ang physics, pero look around you. And everything that makes your life comfortable is a product of science and physics also. Tama? So, paano natin i-harness ang energy in order to perform work? So, alam natin that kinetic energy is energy associated with motion. Tama? So, hanap ka lang dyan sa environment, ano yung naga-move? Ano ba yung naga-move sa environment natin? Since there is motion, then that means there must be kinetic energy. Then that means it can perform work. So, ano ba yung naga-move? Aha! Hangin. Tama? So hangin is moving, that means it has kinetic energy. So that means it has the ability to do work. That is why meron tayong wind farm. Diba, no? Amazing. So nana tayo electrical energy, nana tayo electricity. Ano pa ba sa environment ang naga-move? Na ay kinetic energy? Aha, tubig. Tama? Especially sa waterfalls. Ano? Sa Maria Cristina Falls. So that means we can also utilize that energy in order to perform work. That is why that waterfalls, that kinetic energy can rotate a turbine. So it can perform a work on turbine. Diba? So sa pa ba na energy para makagamit ta og work? Naka-perform ta og work. We have solar energy. So does it mean, sir, now we can utilize solar energy in order to perform work? Yes. Mo ganang natay solar panels. Ano? Amazing. That's the product of physics. That's what physics can offer to you. Char lang. Pero tinoda, di na siya char. Di na siya char. Because energy and work are just basically the same. Unsa pa ba ang common na familiar sa inyo ang energy? Saan ba energy? Wala na po kayo ma-remember. So again, energy and work are just basically the same. If you have energy, then you have the ability to do work. However, what matters, again, what matters is the change. Okay? Kasi kapag wala yung change, then that means it is not possible to do work. So what matters is change. Pwede po na sa life, no? Dapat dahil na i-change, no, para ma-work out. What is true. Okay, so again, that's work energy theorem. Diyan lang galing yung kinetic energy natin. Nakuha na? Any questions? Or is there anything that bothers your mind? Wala? How about potential energy, sir? So potential energy is also derived from the definition of work. So try natin derive ang potential energy. So let us consider again a box. Now this time ang box kay ato ang i-drop. Ganina kay from left to right. So karon ang box na to ato ang i-drop. So after some time naabot siya diri. Okay, so that means at the start of our motion, there is a certain height of our block, initial height. And then after some time, it attains a final height. Ayan. Okay? So now, since this box is only drop, gidrop lang man nato ang bus. What is the force acting on the box? Since it is only dropped, then that means that the only force acting on this box is the force due to gravity. Kay gi-drop lang man mo siya. So weight. Follow. Now, how about its displacement? So it is from the top to the ground or to a certain height. So that means the direction of our displacement is also going downwards. Tama? So they're parallel to each other. So if they are parallel to each other, then that means our equation will become work is equal to FD because again, they are parallel to each other. Do you follow? How about the height here? How are we going to relate the displacement to the height? So that displacement is just the same as the difference of the height. Tama? So the displacement of our object is just final height minus the initial height. Nakuha? Kaya, of course, mag-change man, mag-displace man na siya. So let us substitute these variables to our equation. So the only force acting on our block is the force due to gravity or the weight, which is mg. Tama? mg man na. Multiplied by the displacement. Ano yung displacement natin? The displacement is just the difference in height. So that is hf minus hi. Familiar ng equation, no? Familiar siya, sir. Siyempre, draon na. Nakabutang na daan sa title. Diba? Or we can substitute, or we can distribute distribute this to this term. That will give us mg hf minus mg hi. Ayan. So work pala, work is just, you are already familiar with this equation, tama? This is potential energy. Dyan pala galing yung potential energy. So this is just the same as the final potential energy minus the initial potential energy. So if you notice, parang kan lang, no? Parang pareho lang kanina. So work is the change of kinetic energy. So final kinetic energy minus initial kinetic energy. Now, in terms of potential energy, we can also define work as the change of potential energy. Again, what matters the most is the change. Kasi kapag walang change, then there is no work done. Then it cannot perform any work. Nakuha? So, ang mag-matter lang sa atin, change. Sir, anong ibig sabihin ng formula na yan? Napakadami ng formula. Pero paano namin yan magagamit in real life? So, for example, naglukdo siya og bato. Familiar mo sa naglukdo sa Bisaya? Familiar mo siguro mo. Naay bato daw. Si Darna daw, si Kara. Gikom na ito, no? Gitulon mo na itong Darna. Okay, so naglukdo og bato si Kara. Lukdo means you carry using your head. That's lukdo. If you carry using your back, that's pasan. Sige na sa back. Baba day baba, no? Baba man day na, no? Gibaba nimo. Carrying using your back. If you carry using your shoulder, sige na. Sige. If you carry using your shoulders, unsay tawag? That is sungay. Ano na sungay? Carrying using your shoulder, sungay. If you carry using your hand, using hand, for example, that is beaking. Beaking. Napa na isa? Daghan kay terms sa Bisaya nindot yun. So carrying using your head, lukdo. Using your back, baba. Using your shoulders, sungay. Yeah, using your one shoulder. Kung one shoulder lang. Kung two shoulders, sungay. Kung one shoulder, unsay tawag? That is pasan. Diba pasan? Pasanon. Kan lang. Extra lang. Extra lang. So Bisaya is very amazing. Kara is carrying a stone. Stone na siya, stone. Using her head. So naglukdo siya. And that stone has a mass of 1 kilogram. So unsay ma-feel ni Kara? Masakitan ba siya? Of course not. Dili siya masakitan. Unsay ma-feel niya? Bugat. Tama, bugat lang iyang ma-feel. Pero dili siya masakitan kung iha lang nang gilukdo sa iyang ulo. Why? Because relative to the head of Kara, there is no change in potential energy relative to the head. So there is no change in potential energy, 0 joules relative to the head. Okay, wala may change. So that ang importante man, what matters is the change of potential energy. So that means since there is no change of potential energy, then that stone cannot perform a work on the head of Kara. Tama? That is why dili siya masakitan. Nakuha. However, if that same stone will fall to the foot of Kara, what if mahulog na sa tiil ni Kara? Diri daw sa tiil. So naabot na diri ang stone. Of course, logic would tell us, experience would tell us na grabe ka sakit. Tama? Sakit kayo. Nganong sakit man kayo na? Nga same lang man na sila og mas. 1 kilogram lang man gihapon na. But why is it very painful? Dili man ta siya sakit kung naalang siya sa ulo. Pero pag mahulog na sa imong tiil, it is very painful. Why? Because this time, there is now a change of height. Tama? There is a difference in the height. So na difference in height. Now, if there is a difference in the height, then there is a difference of potential energy. So mayroon pala tayong change of potential energy dito. Okay? Now, if you have a change of potential energy, then that will be able to perform a work. Ayun. So if that is able to perform a work, you will feel pain because of the force. And your bones, the bones of your feet will be displaced. Tama? Because work is FD. Why? Because there is a difference of height. Nakuha? Does it make sense? Now, let's change that situation. The same pa din, si Kara naglukdo lang gihapon og bato. Okay, erase ko ha. Naglukdo lang gihapon og bato si Kara. So that means, since there is no difference in height, wala namang change of potential energy, then that stone cannot perform a work on the head of Kara. So dili siya maka-feel og sakit, tama? So ma-feel lang niya bugat. Okay. However, if that stone is brought sa second floor, and that same stone, 1 kilogram, gihulog, gikan sa second floor sa ulo ni Kara. ayaw i-try sa inyong balay ha ba? Sige, i-try nyo. Tinuod ba kayong physics, no? I-try lang ako ang physics, ba? Kung tinuod ba? Ayaw i-try. Logic would tell us na it will be very painful. Okay? Why is it na sakit man kaayo if ever ihulog nimo siya gikan sa second floor? Nga pareho lang man unta na sila 1 kilogram. Why? Because this time there is now a difference in the height. Tama? There is difference in the height. So if there is a difference in the height, then there is a difference in potential energy. Tama? So, di ay change of potential energy. So if there is a change of potential energy, then that stone can perform a work. Okay, so that is why it will be very painful. Plus, your skull will be displaced. Ayaw i-try. Your skull will be very displaced. Nakuha? Does it make sense? Okay. So again, what matters is the change. Mo nang sakit kayo ma-fall, no? Ma-fall, sakit kayo. Sakit kayo. Ayaw yun pag ma-fall. Ang masakitan kay katong dili mo catch. Char lang. Any questions? So na may oras? Alas 11 naman di. Questions wala? Okay, so take note of the equations. We have 2 equations so far for potential energy. Potential energy is mgh, and kinetic energy is 1/2 mv squared.